Bienvenidos, bienvenidas al canal Aportes Afro-Costarricenses y Diaspóricos. En nuestra sección Conversando con, tenemos al reverendo Miguel Gray Sloan. El reverendo Miguel Gray Sloan es el pastor del Hope Baptist Church en el Puerto de Limón por los últimos 24 años. Sus estudios académicos los realizó en el Seminario Bíblico Latinoamericano, hoy Universidad Bíblica Latinoamericana, la Universidad Nacional de Costa Rica y la United Theological Seminary en la ciudad de Nueva York. Fue miembro of the Commission of Mission and Evangelism of the World Council of Churches entre 1984 y 1992. Es nativo de Nicaragua y costarricense por naturalización. Es casado, padre de 2 hijos y abuelo de 2 nietas, quienes son profesionales en el área de la medicina. El reverendo Sloan esta noche estará conversando con nosotras sobre las prácticas religiosas de la comunidad afro-costarricense. Bienvenido a nuestro canal, reverendo Sloan.
Bienvenido.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very, very much. It's my honor and pleasure to be able to converse with you on this beautiful Monday evening. Es mi honor y un gran placer poder conversar con ustedes en este precioso lunes por la tarde. All right, where should I begin? I would like to think for a little while on maybe to kind of twist it a little bit, and to think about Afro-Costa Rican spirituality. It's just another way to say the same thing, I think. At least that's what I try to attempt. Entonces, la espiritualidad afro-costarricense, and I think it's appropriate to establish from the very beginning the fact that when we talk about spirituality, normally what comes up in people's mind is Christian spirituality, and while we cannot ignore that fact because it's a reality, it's not the sole expression of the spirituality of people of African descent in Limón or in Costa Rica, per se. So I think it's very important to establish that fact. Though it may appear as if the Christian spirituality is the only spiritual expression of people of African descent or the African diaspora here in Limón. So once that is cleared, we could enter into the subject matter that we are faced with this evening. Of course, everybody knows by now that we ended up on this soil as a result of the economical exploits of Costa Rica, and we could even say the Central American Isthmus. It's no secret that we came here as an answer to the plight of Keith and his railroad venture in our country. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing in and of itself. I'm just saying that our presence here is in part the direct result of that enterprise, that economical enterprise. And another thing in relation to that is the fact that as diasporic people, we are not really, it's very easy for us to uproot ourselves whenever needs demand it, because we are a people who are constantly in pursuit, if I can say that. I don't speak good English, so you please bear with me. In pursuit of survival, and whatever we have to do, whatever we need to do to survive, that we will do, period. And I can give you my maybe they say you're not supposed to use yourself as an example, but I'm living in I came to Costa Rica in 1980 to go to school. I did my schooling. I went back home to Nicaragua in Bluefields. I served for a few years, thought I had returned to them what they had given me. I came back to Costa Rica and I'm here. I don't feel any need to go back, but that was the thing to do at the time. That was the thing to do at the time. And so it was not so difficult, I would say, for people from the Caribbean islands, mainly from Jamaica, to come to uproot themselves from the islands and to come establish themselves here and remain here. And if you look at Panama, it's the same thing, and all over the world is the same thing. If we have to move in order to survive, we do it. Matter of fact, in the 60s and 70s, the 60s and 70s, the same thing happened here in Limon. People migrated from the rural areas into the city of Limon for survival purposes, and people migrated from the city of Limon to San Jose, to the United States of America, and to elsewhere, survival. All right. The only maybe difference is that the original migration, as I would call it, from African soil was not a voluntary thing. We all know that. We were brought out to be enslaved, and that is where it begins. So I think it is important to state that in all of this migration pattern, if you may, that we have experienced, has been forced in some cases to experience, has all responded in one way or another to the economical interest of different social groups. In the time of slavery, colonialism, etc., 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 we were always a brute force available, or made available, or forced to respond to the needs and the greeds of others. All right. So our history, as I want to think, does not belong. You guys are historians, so I have to be careful when I talk about history. But our history does not begin when we come to Costa Rica. It does not begin when we arrived at Jamaica, as some people would want us to believe that our history begins with enslavement, and that's not true. We need to go all the way back to Africa. And I'm saying this because I'm trying to make the point that the spiritual exercises or practices of our people, wherever we may be found today in the 21st postmodern era, is still linked to the motherland. It is still linked in one way or another. So that when the enslaved arrived to the Caribbean islands, and especially to Jamaica, where most of us come from, they're one of the few things that survived, survived and served to provide continuity, a connection between the motherland and this new experience, was the people's religion. Their language was taken away from them. Their family connections were taken away from them. They tried to strip them from everything that could identify them as human beings, as people, as people connected to one another. Therefore, they were separated, soul, prohibited to speak their own languages, etc., etc., etc. But one of the few things that survived that hostility of I would call it of against the identity and the most inner being of who a person is was their religious practices or beliefs that were expressed in different ways, shape, and forms. So I think that's important. And so in Jamaica, we see how the emergence, many of these, there were the emergence of many different religious, African religious expressions that that were practiced behind the back of the master, so to speak. So then these practices became how could I say that now? Became a threat to the masters because they did not understand. And people are afraid of what they do not understand. I think that's part of the problem with racism in the United States and the world around. People that don't know, so they're afraid of us. And so that same thing happened in the various. I would like to specifically mention in Jamaica the emergence in the early what is this 18th 19th century, the emergence of what is called revivalism, which is the combination of a religious expression that is made up of the combination of various different African religious practices that survived in the diaspora. And I am mentioning that because from revivalism derived one of the quote unquote African religions that were practiced and repressed here in Limon by the Jamaicans that came here at the turn of the 19th century, 20th century. It's called everybody. Well, many people knows about that Pocomia, and it was repressed, persecuted, repressed, and it practically disappeared. And now in people's memory, what they remember about that practice is very what should I say? It has a negative connotation. It was cannibalistic, etc., etc., etc. And if you were to interview some of the older folks today, that's what they would tell you. Of course, that has a whole, what you should say, dynamics that we could get into later on. But that was, let's say, the most structured expression, the Pocomia of African of an African religion that was practiced in Limon. Of course, there is Obiaism that most people does not consider to be a religion or a religious practice, but it was, and we still have residue of that in Limon even today. So let's leave that aside and come back to that after I said this derived from revivalism in that you call it in Jamaica. Now I'm gonna just let that rest for a while and talk a little bit about the Christian church or Christian religion. We know that the Christian church came to Limon at the end of the 19th century, 1888, through the First Baptist Church, and most of the historical evangelical churches, Protestant evangelical churches in Limon, came just around that same area. And these were what we would call migrant churches, because they came behind their members who were migrating to Costa Rica. And I want to mention this because the Christian religion has permeated the life of people of African descent or Afro-Costa Ricans so strongly that almost every aspect of any African religions that could have survived disappeared. The Christian church played a very important role in the disappearance of the Pocomia, the Catholic Church including, who had access to the powers that be. All right, but on the other hand, one of the expressions that have survived that most people are probably not aware of is the way we manage our dead. The whole procedures that one person or family of African descent follows around the dead. 2 years ago, I sat in a meeting at the Mott Hall, and it was a group of about 15 people, and of different cultures. There was a Jewish person there, some Spanish-speaking people, Hispanic, and of course, Afro-Costa Ricans, and Miss Blanca, who is one of the most outstanding Black women who takes care of the dead here in Limon, was present. And so it was a kind of round table kind of a situation. And we were just, exploring on the different understandings of and managing of the dead. And it was pointed out that, Black people are so proud and so, the word we use is show off, that when we have a dead, we want to overdo things. But that's not really so. That was totally totally erratic, if that's the word. Why I'm mentioning this, because this I think is one of the few connection to African spirituality or religion that still survive in Limon. Fading away, but it's still there. And I'm going to share this anecdote. 2 weeks ago, a friend of ours died in San Jose on a Sunday. What was it? Saturday. Okay, it was a Saturday night. They had her wake, or set up as we call it, on Sunday. No, she died on Friday night. They had her wake on Saturday night, and her funeral was on Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning. And she was Black, but she was a member in a Spanish church. All right. Now, the thing is, that would never happen in a unique Black family. Very strange, very, very strange. Because, and I have asked the question, why is it, for example, when we have a dead in the family, we can't get rid of it quick, can't get rid of the corpse very quick. We can't do the funeral quick, you know. Whereas if you have with a Spanish family, the person dies early in the morning and they can do their funeral service in the afternoon. All right, we can't do it, you know. And I have interviewed people to try to get a better understanding, and all they say and all they know is, you know, we have to prepare, and you can't get everything done in one day. And I said, why can Spanish people get everything done? And they would just laugh and, you know, no, but we have to prepare. And that's because in there is still this religious idea that the dead has to be treated, the dead has to be given a certain treatment in the process towards burial. The dead has to be honored. In the revivalist movement, when the person died, there was a setup that took place 2 days, 1 or 2 days before the actual burial ceremony, and all those days previous to the funeral ceremony, there was it was almost like a party celebration, lots of food, etc., etc., etc. In the setup, as they call it, hymns from Sankis. Carmen, you know about those probably. I don't know if the doc knows. Sankis were sung all night long. And all of this is a residue of this religious African religious practice that have survived among us up until today. If you can recall going to a Black funeral as recent as a month ago, if you have had that experience, you see, for example, we dress up to go to a funeral. It is a big social event. People in Limon Black people in Limon dress to go to watch night services, 31st of December, and funeral services. Not even much on Easter now. But those are two religious activities that Black people prepare for. They dress themselves, they ready up themselves. 31st of December and the funeral service, because that's as I said, the residue of how you treat the dead. If you go to a Spanish setup, it's Coca-Cola, coffee, and sandwich. If you go to a Black setup, it's soup and patty and journey cake and more food, because there is that life that has started its way to an eternal existence has to be celebrated. And John M. Beatty, in his book African Religions, makes that plain for us, because what does one celebrate? Not the death of the person, but the beginning of a journey towards eternity. And it is in John's and Beatty's explanation, the person, the deceased, is not really absent from the family. The person remains an integral part of the family until the last member of the living family remembers that person. In other words, the deceased have not arrived to his final or her final destiny until the last person of the living family cease to remember him or her. So that's what's going on in our managing of the dead. Though today people do not really what you call it, manage that explanation. There are a whole host of things that we do that has been handed down to us, that we inherited from our foreparents, that we just go through the rituals, but we don't know the justification for them anymore. Now, just to close this part, all of this, as you know, today it's a kind of this expression is a kind of syncretic religious expression, because it's now combined with Christian religion and the African religious expression that still survives. So one would look at it and say it's a Christian thing, but it's not. While it is Christian, it's not. That expression is not strictly Christian. It's not 100% Christian. Now, maybe moving into that which we would call strictly Christian, I would just like to point out both the Pocomia, Revivalism, and now our Christian religion, they all combined together as what should I say, a surviving force that enabled our ancestors to face the trials and the turmoils and the difficulties of life and to overcome. And I think that's probably that's the last point I would like to touch before just maybe if you have any questions. But that is very important. It was not just go to church because you go to church, or go to the Pocomia field because that was the thing to do. All of these combined together were a force of survival that enabled our people to overcome the harsh realities that they faced, whether it was in Jamaica or here in Costa Rica or there in Panama. So a lot of our grandparents, for example, I don't know if you have lived that experience, they would see to it that we went to church, though they didn't go. And one would say and they would force you to go to church, and they would demand of you to learn the scriptures and to recite memory verses and to be a good morally morally qualified person in the family and in the society, while they themselves were not living, let's say, quote unquote, morally qualified life. What am I trying to say? Most of our grandparents had children for men that were not their husbands. And many of them had children for many men, different men, children, different men fathered their children. And all of their children grew up in church, in Sunday school. And some of them went to more than one church during the course of one Sunday. All right. And they never really, these people never really went to church every Sunday. They forced their children to. But why did they go to church? Precisely because their moral life was not up to the level of expectation that the church had on them, or even for themselves. They were convinced that they were not living the type of life that made it possible for them, that they would be qualified to go to church and live the kind of life that they knew they should be living, or what they were convinced that they should be living. What am I trying to say here? That there was a moral contradiction, but yet there was a strong conviction that being a Christian or living a Christian life was the right thing to do. So even though they were not able, because of their particular life circumstance of survival, they were not able to live the Christian life as was expected and as they were convinced. They saw to it that their children live out for them what they could not for themselves. But I have seen, for example, a number of elderly folks, I mean grandparents, senior citizens, who are now, and since in my 20-odd years of service here in the month, I have seen them as leaders in the church. But when they were young and having their children and working very hard to survive as a family, of course, they were living their lives the only way they could, all right? But they got to a place, let's say, where they finished away, put away that kind of living because they were elderly persons now, and now they were able to formalize their relationship with the church and to live up to the expectation, or in other words, live out their spirituality, all right? But the point I want to make here is that though during all those years when they were not able to live up to the expectation of the Christian church, they were still people of strong faith. And so oftentimes when times got very hard, very, very hard for them, when food became scarce and money was difficult to find, it was their faith in God that allowed them to not give up, but to keep on, as they say, keep on keeping on, because they had their children and their children's future in their hand. So what I'm trying to say here is that it was their spiritual conviction, their Christian spiritual conviction that helped them to survive the cruelties, the difficulties, the challenges that they faced as families. I'm talking about the second half, the whole 20th century. So first you had the Pocomia that served as a tool of survival for the people of Afro-Costa Ricans, and then you had on one hand, on the other hand, you had a combination of both practices, the Christian faith and the Pocomia or the Obia, and then lastly, the Christian church that permeated the entire religious spectrum of our people. Note that the Pocomia was practiced mostly by the lowest social segment of Afro-Costa Rican people. These are the people that were really struggling on a daily basis to survive. And it was that faith that helped to see them over on the other side. So I think that's too much of little of everything. I don't know if I said anything and if it served anything, but if there is any questions, I will be very happy to try to answer.
Somos voces de la historia, sangre, tinta y papel. Somos voces de la historia, mis ancestros, su saber, mis ancestros, su saber, mis ancestros, su saber.